Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to a new video. Today we're going to be looking at why was this plane invulnerable, the SR-71 Blackbird. Don't actually know really anything about this, so I'm very interested to hear what they've got to say. But let's hear why this plane was so good. Remember to like, subscribe, turn notifications bell on, comment below with what you want to see in the future and what you think of the video, and let's get into it.
Thanks to Squarespace for making this video possible and for helping launch my new mustard store. More on that after this video. In the midst of the Cold War, two MiG-25s raced to intercept the threat along the Soviet border. They're the fastest interceptors ever built, and if they really push their engines, they can reach an incredible Mach 3.2.
So that is quick. Mach 3.2 is what, just over 3 times the speed of sound. 700 miles an hour, isn't it, the speed of sound or something like that? So it's 3 times that. So an incredible speed and a rate of knots to go at.
Not enough, because what they're chasing can outrun and outclimb any threat. A plane engineered to be invulnerable.
How fast can this go then? The Blackbird.
The Cold War locked the United States and Soviet Union into a tense struggle for global influence and control. Both sides poured enormous resources into military technologies, but getting an upper hand means knowing your opponent.
Look at that. So the size of the Soviet Union. Humongous. Obviously, maps aren't always to scale. Normally, a lot of countries actually look a lot larger than what they actually are in proportion, but massive.
Opponent's next move. And in the 1950s, little was known about facilities deep within the Soviet Union. An extensive network of radar stations, surface-to-air missile sites, and interceptor air bases kept the Americans away. Until 1956, when U-2 spy planes began flying over the Soviet Union. Neither fast nor stealthy, U-2s had one critical advantage. At 70,000 feet, they could fly above Soviet air defenses.
That is high.
US President Eisenhower was even assured Soviet radars couldn't detect the U-2 at such high altitudes. But it turns out the Americans were wrong.
Oh, really?
The Soviets had tracked the U-2 since day one, and it was only a matter of time before they'd be able to shoot one down. Simply flying high wasn't enough.
Okay, so basically, what it's saying is it could fly 70,000 feet. Americans thought they can't be caught on radar, but the Soviet Unions could. They could actually see them on the radio, but they didn't actually have anything to shoot it out as for now. So the Americans were quite lucky at that point. But the Soviet Union did know they were flying overhead, so it wasn't all that good.
In its surveillance missions, there were already plans underway to replace it, because true impunity over Soviet airspace would need a combination of incredible speed, altitude, and stealth. And this led the Americans to explore some pretty radical spy plane concepts, like a ramjet-powered aircraft that would be deployed from the bottom of a supersonic B-58.
That's pretty cool.
But in 1959, the CIA chose Lockheed to develop the next generation of spy planes.
CIA.
Meanwhile, the U-2 continued to fly over the Soviet Union, but not for very long. Because in the spring of 1960, a Soviet surface-to-air missile finally managed to bring one down. The captured pilot and wreckage were paraded around the Soviet Union, used as proof of Western aggression. As tensions rose, now more than ever, the U.S. needed a replacement.
That's it. That's what they do with propaganda. So the Soviet Union would have been spying on the Americans. The Americans were spying on them. But because they shot one down, they would be able to say, look what the Americans are doing to us. We're doing nothing to them. When really they actually were spying. They were doing exactly the same. But it's all to get your people on side, just in case a war kicks off, so you've got them on side.
For the U-2. And what Lockheed developed would be unlike any aircraft ever built. A plane that nearly 60 years after its first flight remains the fastest air-breathing jet to ever fly.
No way.
Lockheed's highly classified spy plane would be known as the A-12. Originally used by the CIA for reconnaissance, the A-12 was also developed into an interceptor prototype, armed with air-to-air missiles, along with a variant that could launch an unmanned reconnaissance drone. But it was the SR-71 Blackbird, a variant developed for the Air Force, that would go on to serve for decades.
That's quite a few. 13, 3, 2 and 32. So they had quite a big fleet.
While earlier versions were quickly retired. The Blackbird could cruise at Mach 3.2, right near the edge of space, and do it for hours on end.
No way.
To achieve this, Lockheed's engineers had to innovate pretty much everything from scratch. To sustain such incredible speeds, the SR-71 and its predecessors were powered by engines often described as turbo ramjets. Below Mach 2, they functioned like conventional afterburning jet engines. But above that, they behaved more like ramjets, as an inlet cone adjusted to bypass air around the engine and directly into the afterburner.
Not gonna lie, I don't really know much about jet engines. All pretty confusing, isn't it? And very technical. So you have to give it to the people that make and design this sort of stuff. And for this to cruise easily at 3.3 Mach 3.2 or 3.3 is just absolutely insane at 85,000 feet. You think a commercial plane cruises at 30 to 35,000 feet. This is cruising at 85,000 feet.
At Mach 3.2, the SR-71's exterior would heat up to beyond 500 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh my God.
Easily hot enough to soften aircraft aluminum. The Lockheed engineers used titanium for 92% of the aircraft. And in the 1960s, this required inventing entirely new fabrication technology.
Yeah, and you got to think this was done in the 1960s, 60 years ago.
Its unusual shape did more than just spook UFO enthusiasts. It helped reduce its radar signature, as did its special black paint, which earned the SR-71 its Blackbird name. The A-12 and SR-71 were first deployed over North Korea and Vietnam, where they were unsuccessfully targeted by over 800 surface-to-air missiles. But the spy plane never flew into Soviet airspace, at least not officially, because another shoot-down over the Soviet Union would be catastrophic. So instead, the SR-71 flew along its borders, using its powerful side-looking radars and cameras to peer hundreds of miles into Soviet territory.
No way.
And that frustrated the Soviets. In 1976, Viktor Belenko defected to the West by escaping the Soviet Union in his MiG-25.
Oh, wow.
He described the frustration of trying to intercept Blackbirds. The MiGs were Mach 3 capable, but only for a few minutes at a time, not for hours like the Blackbird. Nor could they climb to reach the SR-71's incredible altitude. Even their enormous R-40 missiles lacked the guidance needed to strike the SR-71 head-on.
Oh, wow.
For years, the Blackbirds were practically invulnerable. They could outfly and outclimb any threat. But by the 1980s, MiG-31s were roaming the skies. Equipped with sophisticated radar and long-range R-33 missiles, they posed a legitimate threat, as did a new generation of Soviet surface-to-air missiles.
Yeah, I think 80s, there was a massive upgrade in a lot of technology for a lot of nations. So it is about time that people are going to start catching up with you. So definitely something that's sort of been built in the 60s.
But the greatest threat to the Blackbird wasn't an enemy missile or jet, it was itself. No Blackbird was ever lost on a mission, but more than a third of the 50 built were destroyed in accidents.
A bit like the
One
Concorde.
literally disintegrated around its pilots. They were also enormously expensive to operate, each one siphoning about $300 million a year out of America's defense budget.
No way.
A fleet of special aerial refuelers and a small army of support and maintenance staff were needed just to keep these planes mission ready. And advances in spy satellites, aerial drones, and the SR-71's inability to deliver surveillance data in real time diminished some of the plane's utility. Add to that politics and infighting for defense budgets, and by the late 1980s, the SR-71's days were numbered. They were officially retired in 1998, with 2 sent to NASA for testing.
Like I said, it's something that's built in the 60s. Look how fast technology develops. It's just going to happen. It can't keep up with the speed and the times of the way technology is absolutely, just especially now, but even back then through the 70s, 80s and 90s, everything was developing so quickly. It's massively going to struggle to keep up, even if it is such a good plane at, you know, speeds and altitude.
The technology behind the A-12 and SR-71 is now well over 50 years old. Yet somehow these incredible planes still speak to us. Not about the past, but the future, leaving us with a sense of wonder, unlike any other in aviation history. A few months ago, I launched my mustard site with Squarespace.
Yeah, so it's obviously a really highly technical plane that was, you know, could not be outmaneuvered or, you know, for many, many years. But technology obviously does catch up very quickly. And then you to surface-to-air missiles and some of the surface-to-surface missiles, you've got a day, you can just go hundreds of kilometers, you know. So it's pretty crazy how quickly it catches up. So there's only so long you're going to be top dog and number one until it finally actually happens, where you sort of have to retire and bring in something new and try and develop something new to sort of stay on top of airspace and warfare nowadays. So, but it is crazy to think that that was developed in the 60s, 20 years after World War II, when you think majority of the fighter planes were, you know, propeller aircraft. You know, your standard tanks weren't really that good back then. Minimal armor, minimal firepower. And then 20 years later, you got a plane flying at Mach 3.2 at 85,000 feet and being undetected. So really impressive what they did back then, and had to develop all the new technologies to obviously build that. So very impressive. But let's know what your thoughts are on that. I'll see you soon. Remember to like, subscribe and turn notifications bell on. Cheers.